Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paladin Dance. Welcome to the channel, and today I'm going to be going over the state of tanks right now in the current patch, how much DPS they're doing at the end of dungeon, how tanky they are, and their overall viability in M+ at the moment. I'm going to be doing this to compare the tanks and possible fixes that Blizzard could implement for patch 9.1, and after that I'll be throwing out a video on specific Prot Paladin changes that I'd like to see as we're closing in on 9.1. There will be timestamps down below. If you guys enjoy the video, please consider subscribing. And with that all said, let's get right into it. When it comes to DPS, Prot Paladin is in a perfectly good position for tanking. They're doing really good damage. In a perfect world, you probably do the highest damage amongst tanks, maybe even a little bit more than monks and demon hunters. However, we have to keep in mind when we look at these charts, a couple caveats, right? So first off, even though I can sit in front of a bunch of target dummies and do a ton of damage when compared to a Prot Warrior or a Blood DK or a Druid, stuff like that, you have to keep in mind that when you're doing a 20 key or a 21 key or whatever it is, 18, 19, whatever you do, you're going to be kiting a lot in those higher range keys, right? So the tank's not going to be just standing there dishing out their damage. They're going to be kiting, and that's going to affect the damage they can effectively put out. So I'll see a lot of monks with higher damage output at the end of dungeon than Prot Paladins, and same with demon hunters at times. Usually demon hunters and Prot Paladins are usually comparable when I look at logs. However, if you're really tanky and you can just sit there and tank and do your rotation, you're going to be putting out more damage than someone who's got to kite a lot like a Prot Paladin. So you have to take these with a grain of salt. You also have to look at these logs. You know, when we look at these, you have to remember that some of these runs, if someone screws up and you have to, you know, redo a route real quick on the fly, if you have to end up kiting a lot more, something goes wrong, the DPS is going to be a little bit off. However, I've got examples of higher keys for this just so that you guys can see, right? So these are all going to be Mist of Tyrannus Scythe. Usually all of them are going to be on the same week. So I have a 22 Mist here from this Prot Paladin. He ended up doing 3.3 and a dungeon. Pretty respectable, pretty good damage. You go over here, we go to a Druid, 22 Mist of Tyrannus Scythe, same week. And this Bear Druid is doing 3.5k overall. So again, on paper, Prot Paladins should be doing more damage. But if you can tank a lot like a Druid can, then they might be able to output more damage, right? And here again, we have a 21 Mist. I could not find a 22 Mist for monks. There weren't any logged because not that many people play monks. Not that there haven't been 22 Mist time for monks, it's just nobody logged them. So here I have a 21, still pretty comparable. You know, monk doing 3.6k and a dungeon, very good damage. Again, I've seen a lot of monks do more than this. I've seen 4k from monks before. Honestly, I think monks do the most damage when it comes to tanks right now. I haven't really seen any tanks end of dungeon hit 4k in these really high keys. Here we have a 22 Mist. It was untimed, but you know, even untimed, this guy did 4.1k as Demon Hunter. This is a little bit higher than usual, to be honest, but most of the time you'll see Demon Hunters around 3.8, 3.6 on the low end, you know, around there. They're doing really good damage, and obviously they're the tankiest class by far. I'm not going to go into depth why, but they have an insane mitigation. They're really good for this kiting meta right now. And you go into Blood DKs. Again, here we have a 22, same week. And for Blood DKs, a lot of people sleep on how tanky they are, but they're insanely tanky. They're actually really good at mitigating damage, more so than Prot Paladin. I think their tankiness is pretty good, but we'll touch on that a little bit more later. However, in a dungeon, 3k, you know, obviously you have less damage done, and that's why Blood DKs want to see some buffs. Again, that's why you want to see Prot Warriors buffed a little bit. I think those two classes are tanky enough. I think they just need a little bit more damage, right? So this 3k does not compare with 4k or 3.6, 3.5, 3.3, right? Like they're not up to par, and that's going to slow your dungeon down, and it's just going to make it so that it's harder to time a key, especially when you're pushing 22s, 23s, stuff like that. Every single minute is going to count, and when you can shave off more time by doing more damage, that's going to help out the team a lot. That's why you're going to see less Blood DKs being played, less Prot Warriors, because they're not putting out this kind of damage, right? So even though Blood DKs and for sure Prot Warriors are tankier than a Prot Paladin, you're not going to see these played as much. because the Prot Paladin is going to be putting out more damage, and that's just going to make the dungeon go by faster, right? Prot Warriors, sadly, really do not do that much damage. I feel really bad for them. If I were a Prot Warrior main, I'd feel really bad about the state of the class right now. They did have a lot of time to shine in BFA, but you know, it still sucks that you can't even perform as good as a Blood DK, right? You're stuck at 2.5k total damage for a dungeon. That's really, really low for a tank, and this is only a level 20 key. I could not find a level 22 or 21 for any Prot Warriors. There weren't any logged that I could find, and this isn't even the same fortified week as the other ones. You know, it's a different fortified week. However, this was earlier on in the season, so they may have been a little bit more under gear, less damage. You have to take that into consideration. But however, it is 2 levels easier and still just 2.5k damage overall. So Warriors definitely need a damage buff for sure. When it comes to comparing Prot Paladins to other tanks with damage, the damage is fine. We don't need more damage. We do have to spec into those damage legendaries. We don't get to be like a Druid where you can go with your tanky legendary and still output 3.5k on a 22 miss. We don't get to be like monks, where even though monks do use a damage legendary, it also lets them keg smash, which reduces their damage taken. All we get is bulwark, which doesn't reduce any damage we take. It does give us insane damage, but it doesn't reduce the damage we take. Same thing with engraved sigil. You could get a couple extra interrupts here and there, which might reduce the overall damage you take, but it's not actual mitigation like you get from other legendaries for other tanks. And it also has to be said that Druids and monks and demon hunters might not have to kite as much because of their tankiness. However, Prot Paladins literally are just paper, and you're going to have to start kiting a lot earlier than the other classes would. So even though on paper we do the most damage as a tank, it's hard to actually output that damage because we are kiting all the time since we're not that tanky. Then again, real briefly, Blood DKs, pretty good tankiness when it comes to being tanky. Obviously not on the level of a demon hunter, but I've seen some high keys being pushed, and they do pulls that I have to start kiting, and I've seen them face tank as a Blood DK. It's just their damage, again, not as high as the other classes. Prot Warriors, obviously they just need a little bit more damage. This is pretty pitiful, and I feel sorry for them. So that basically covers the DPS side of things for most tanks right now. And again, this is just a general idea, but essentially Prot Paladins, monks, demon hunters, all doing really good damage. Even Druids doing some pretty good damage when you look at how tanky they are, to be honest. And then you look at Blood DKs and Warriors, and they're really the 2 classes mainly that are lagging behind when it comes to the damage department. They could really use some buffs. I think the other tanks, when it comes to DPS, are in a pretty good state. Now, when you start assessing the tankiness of all the actual tanks that we have available to us right now, that's when you start seeing some disparities, with Demon Hunter obviously being number 1 for various reasons. So just to list a few, we'll start off with Fiery Brand. It decreases the damage that the enemy does to you by 40% for 8 seconds, and you can spread that brand to other enemies with the talent Burning Alive, so you have that going for you on a 1-minute cooldown. You also have Fell Devastation on a 1-minute cooldown, which heals you for basically your entire HP bar, and in conjunction with that, if you talent into Demonic, you get to proc your meta for 6 seconds. So not only do you have a full heal from Fell Devastation, but afterwards you have 6 seconds of Metamorphosis. That's going to be on a 1-minute cooldown. So 1 minute cooldown Metamorphosis on top of actually having Metamorphosis. So now we're talking about a 1-minute cooldown on Fiery Brand, 1-minute cooldown Fell Devastation, which also comes with a 1-minute cooldown 6-second Metamorphosis on top of your actual Metamorphosis. Then you have your Demon Spikes, which increases your armor by a crap ton, and it also increases your parry chance by 15% for 6 seconds. You have 2 charges of that on a 20-second recharge. So Demon Hunter has a lot of really good cooldowns on a really low CD, and they also have a cheat death, the best cheat death in the game, which you can talent into. So they have a lot of stuff going for them on top of insane amounts of damage. So not only are they the most survivable, not only do they mitigate the most magic damage, their kit is made so that every single pool you go into in M+ right now, you have a good cooldown up and available for you to be able to tank. And then, you know, once your cooldowns run out, you can just start kiting like all the rest of the tanks. Next up, you have Brewmaster, which obviously is extremely tanky when it comes to physical damage, especially because of their stagger. So not only are they staggering a ton of physical damage, but they also have had some of the stuff that they suffered from before, like not having that much healing or that many CDs. They have had that fixed in this expansion with things like Expel Harm, where you get an extra heal there. Things like Celestial Brew, which is their main new CD on a 1 minute cooldown as well, where you get a huge shield on yourself. And things like Dampen Harm, which you can talent into, which is a 2 minute cooldown, but you do get to have another defensive up. So Brewmaster's extremely durable, especially when it comes to physical damage, which is what they've always been really good at. But now they even have ways to deal with a little bit of that magic damage as well, on top of having some of the best mobility in the game. So once they don't have cooldowns, they can easily kite with things like their Keg Smash, which slows things down. They also have Ring of Peace, and they also have their rolls, so they can just get out of combat easily. They have a really good compact kit for M+ at the moment, on top of, as we already went over, dealing really good amounts of damage as well. Next, I'll go over Prot Paladins. Prot Paladins don't really have the best cooldowns available to them. That's why they are kind of like the paper tank at the moment. They have Guardian of the Ancient Kings, which is a 5 minute cooldown, and then you have Ardent Defender, which is a 2 minute cooldown. Now, yes, you can bring Ardent Defender down to a 1.4 minute cooldown with the talent, and you can also bring the CD down a little bit further, down to maybe about 1.2 to possibly even 1 minute at times, if you spec into the correct conduit. However, you have to spec into a talent and a special conduit in order for you to have that CD down to 1 minute. Meanwhile, you take a look at Druids, for example, and you have Barkskin at a 1 minute cooldown. So, you know, Barkskin essentially is Ardent Defender, except that it's on a 1 minute cooldown baseline. For Paladins, it's 2 minutes. And in addition, you can bring Barkskin down with some talents and legendaries to a lower cooldown, so you can have it up even faster, you know, 45, 30 seconds. And you also have the Survival Instincts at a 3 minute cooldown, which is essentially a Guardian of the Ancient Kings, but on 3 minutes instead of 5. So while Guardian Druid might not be at the same level as a Demon Hunter, you do have Iron Fur, which can stack and is a really good physical damage mitigator along with your HP pools. Iron Fur is extremely good. And you're also going to have a good heal in Frenzied Regeneration. So even something like Bear Druid is way tankier, way beefier, has cooldowns up at a higher rate than Prot Paladin. Prot Paladin really is stuck with just Guardian of the Ancient Kings and Ardent Defender. So you're suffering from not being able to have cooldowns up that often. And then on top of all that, Shield of the Righteous, or Active Mitigation, isn't really the best. It doesn't mitigate as much damage as something like a Stagger or Iron Fur, or even Ignore Pain. Or Ignore Pain, you can block magic damage on top of the physical damage. Shield of the Righteous is only going to give you armor, and I don't think it's going to give you as much mitigation as some of the other options that other tanks have. So you're going to have to go into pools with less CDs up at times, and with an active mitigation that isn't as strong, on top of the fact that if you want to use your Word of Glory to heal yourself, you're going to have to sacrifice uptime on Shield of the Righteous, because they both share holy power. So you're not going to be able to Shield of the Righteous and use your Word of Glory at the same time, unless you talent into Divine Purpose and you get a proc, but that's all RNG. So baseline, you're not really going to have a kit that's very conducive to Mythic Plus at the moment. However, as Prot Paladin, like we did go over, you do have insane damage, and that's kind of what's carrying Prot Paladin right now in M+. When it comes to Druids, again, I just basically went over them when comparing them to Prot Paladins, but you're going to have your Frenzied Regeneration and your Iron Fur, which is what you're going to dump your Fury into. Great active mitigation in Iron Fur, great healing from Frenzied Regeneration. Your legendaries are going to give you really good mitigation. If you use the Thrash legendary, you'll get a little bit extra DPS from there, but you're also going to get really good mitigation on top of the low CD on Barkskin, which is also going to help you out along with your big HP pool. So Guardian Druids can probably be the tankiest, just about as tanky as Demon Hunters when you compare the two, except that Demon Hunters obviously are going to be edging the Guardian Druids out in damage. The Guardian Druids are going to have to be sacrificing some damage in order to get that tankiness. Going into Blood DKs are a little bit softer than other tanks, but still tankier than something like Protection Paladin, and they still are extremely durable even in high M+. You do have a lot of magic mitigation in Anti-Magic Shell, where you become essentially immune to magic damage, and also Anti-Magic Zone, where you can put down a zone for your entire party and have members take 20% less damage while they're in it. You also have access to Rune Tap, which reduces all damage you take by 20% for 4 seconds on a 25-second recharge. In addition to having Icebound Fortitude, which is a larger cooldown at 3 minutes. So again, we're kind of running into that problem where right now the meta is shifting more towards tanks that have cooldowns on a shorter basis instead of these older ones that are bigger, like Guardian of the Ancient Kings and stuff like that, but still 3 minutes, kind of respectable. You can have it up for like just about every other pool. And then you have Vampiric Blood, which is a 1.5 minute cooldown, where this is probably your most versatile cooldown as a Blood DK, where it increases your max HP by 3% while also increasing healing, and it absorbs by 30% for 10 seconds. So really good amount of CDs in general. They have a lot of tools available, while obviously being able to heal an insane amount through Death Strike. So Blood DKs have a pretty decent kit for M+ right now. They have access to a lot of defensive abilities. The defensive abilities might not be as strong as some other tanks, but they have access to so many of them that it makes them versatile enough that in conjunction with the healing they do, they are pretty durable in M+. The only problem again with them is that they don't do as much damage as other classes do, but they are overall pretty durable. And then finally we make it to Warriors, and Warriors are, as always, they are extremely tanky. So with your active mitigation of Ignore Pain, which reduces just a flat amount of damage, so it's going to be physical or magic damage, so really good active mitigation in the sense that you can mitigate some of that magic damage, while other tanks like Druids, Prot Paladins, Blood DKs, Monks, literally just about every other tank, they can't reduce that magic damage coming in. Usually they just have active mitigation that reduces physical damage. With Ignore Pain, you do ignore magic damage in addition to the physical damage. You also have Shield Block in conjunction with Ignore Pain to provide you with a really good baseline suite. Now, when it comes to actual cooldowns, Prot Warriors do have a little bit of that. Prot Warriors do have a little bit longer cooldowns, so something like Last Stand increases your max HP by 30% for 15 seconds. Really good ability, 3 minute cooldown though, so again, you'll have it up like just about every other pool, but it's a pretty strong ability. You also have Shield Wall, which is your best damage mitigator, reduces all damage you take by 50% for 8 seconds on a 4 minute cooldown. And then you have your Demo Shout, which is a really good cooldown. In conjunction with your active mitigation, this is going to make Prot Warriors extremely tanky because it reduces all the damage that mobs deal to you by 20% for 8 seconds to all the mobs that are around you. That's on a 45-second cooldown. That's going to be that's going to be what you use in the current M+ meta, where you need a cooldown just about every single pool. You have your Demo Shout up literally every single time. In conjunction with your legendary, which you can use as, I think there's one that decreases the cooldown on your Demo Shout, if I'm correct. There's another one that decreases the cooldown on your Shield Wall. So your legendaries are defensive. Your kit baseline is extremely defensive. You're very durable. You also have Rallying Cry on a 3 minute cooldown, which you can't forget about. You have Spell Reflect, which is insane utility. You have your Charge, your Intervene, your Heroic Leap, which means they're very mobile. They can kite efficiently. Warriors literally have all the tankiness that they'll ever need. The only problem being they do absolutely abysmal damage, which we went over already, and that's why Warriors are kind of not used right now. It's not because they're not tanky, but because they're not outputting enough damage to speed up the keys in higher M+. So that's going to be it for the tank comparison today, guys. As you can see, when it comes to damage, I think that most tanks are in a good state right now. Most tanks don't need a change when it comes to their damage output. I think that Blood DKs definitely need to be brought up a little bit, and Prot Warriors definitely need a good amount of help in order to be competitive whatsoever. Those two classes do need their damage to be brought up a good amount. Maybe a little bit of damage for Druids, just maybe a little bit. I think Druids are a very good baseline to go off of as a tank right now though. I think that Blizzard should be balancing tanks around kind of the state of Monks and Druids at the moment. Now, when it comes to overall tankiness, the problem here is that Blizzard has this kiting meta, and that is not to say that in high keys there won't be a kiting meta, right guys? So if I go into a 20 key, a 21, a 22, 23, I expect to have to start to kite more, right? That's just part of an infinitely scaling system. I'm gonna expect to have to kite, and that's fine because the content is getting so hard that your kit can't take it anymore. You can't just face tank everything. I'm okay with that. It allows for skill expression at the higher levels, but the only problem right now being that when you're doing 17, 18 keys, you have to kite insane amounts already, right? You have to kite stuff that normally you wouldn't have to kite, and that's the problem. So if Blizzard is gonna keep this kiting meta, then they have to equip the other tanks with things to be successful in the kiting meta. So what would that look like? So for warriors, they would just need more damage. Their kit is already extremely tanky and they have the mobility. For blood DKs, they would maybe need, I don't know, a little bit extra mobility somehow, and then they would need more damage, obviously. For Prot Paladins, they would just need more mitigation. Right now, I would say they're the least tanky of any class. They just need more mitigation overall. I think for Druids and Monks, they're already in a good state. Druids, not the most mobile, but they are more mobile than Blood DKs and Prot Paladins. They're extremely durable. They do a decent amount of respectable damage. Monks, same deal. They do even more damage, and they're extremely durable, and they have a really good mobility, so they're in a good place for a kiting meta. Demon Hunters obviously are kings right now. They just have to be brought down a little bit, to be honest, but even then they would still be equipped for this kind of meta. So the only problem I see with this meta is that it's kind of making it so that tanks, in order to be successful, are almost having to be homogenized in a sense, right? Like, to be able to kite, you need to have the mobility, and most tanks do, but you also need to have defensives in order to be able to tank any mob pools that you do up front before you start kiting, because otherwise you're just gonna die. If I go in, I have to do a big pool of like 10 mobs, and I don't have anything up, I'm probably just gonna die. I can't just start kiting off the bat. I need something to help me mitigate damage while I get everything gathered, and then I get ready to start kiting. Not all the tanks are equipped that way right now, and if they keep this meta, that's what they're gonna have to kind of do. They're gonna kind of have to homogenize tanks a little bit in order to make them more viable. So I hope Blizzard just kind of takes a stance. You know, if they're going to keep this meta, then they can still find creative ways in order to make tanks still unique and still viable in the meta. And if they're going to throw the meta out, then you might not have to worry so much about homogenizing the tanks as much. But that's just my 2 cents. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Let me know how I got this wrong. Let me know if I got it right. Let me know all your opinions. Tear me a new one if you want. This is just how I see it right now, along with a lot of other people, to be fair. And I'm very excited to see what they have in store for 9.1. If you made it this far, please consider subscribing, and I will catch you all in the next video.